So, you want to bring Formula One back to Sepang just for one race? At first, it sounds like an incredible opportunity. Over 400 million people watch Formula One around the world. The fastest cars ever built, the biggest names in motorsport, thousands of international tourists flying into Malaysia, millions of ringgit flowing through hotels, restaurants, airlines and local businesses. On paper, it sounds like an easy decision. So why are Malaysians against it? Because they remember what happened last time Formula One came to Sepang. Malaysia hosted the Grand Prix for nearly 2 decades and then we walked away. Most people believe they already know why. It was losing money. It was too expensive. The numbers didn't make sense. But here's the surprising part. This isn't the same deal. The Formula One that left Malaysia in 2017, building the best circuit in the world, doesn't mean Malaysia gets to automatically host races. This is because Formula One isn't really in the business of racing. It's in the business of selling the rights to host a race. And if the rumors are true, for the first time in years, Formula One might need Malaysia more than Malaysia needs Formula One. So, is this time actually different? Does it make business sense for Malaysia? Let's break down the economics. For most people, buying a Formula One ticket feels straightforward. You pay for admission, you watch the race, the organizer makes money. Simple. Except, that's not how Formula One works. Malaysia has to pay a toll to host a race, and this toll isn't owned by the Malaysian government. Formula One management is the commercial rights holder. This payment is called the promoter fee. Malaysia paying for Formula One to visit. This is the reason why Malaysia stopped hosting the race. The fee gets more expensive almost every year. By the final years of the Malaysian Grand Prix, it is estimated the fee is around 270 million ringgit. Before a single spectator walks through the gate, before the first Ramly burger is sold, Malaysia was already in the red. And here's where things become interesting. That wasn't even the full cost. Imagine organizing a wedding. Pay for the venue is expensive, but once you book the hall, the bills keep coming. Flowers, security, food, electricity, cleaning, photography. The venue was only the beginning. Hosting Formula One works exactly the same way. Sepang may already exist, but transforming it into a Formula One venue takes weeks of preparation. Hundreds of temporary workers have to be hired. Thousands of barriers and safety fences need inspection. Every curb, every drainage system, and every runoff area must meet FIA standards. Medical teams must be on standby. Fire crews are stationed around the circuit. Hundreds of marshals are trained months in advance. Television broadcasters bring in tons of specialized equipment. Temporary hospitality suites are built. Corporate lounges are furnished. VIP areas are prepared. Traffic management plans are activated. Police officers are deployed. Emergency services coordinate with hospitals. Every light, every camera, every timing system must function properly. If just one critical system fails, the race may not even start. Suddenly, that 250 million ringgit promoter fee doesn't look like the only problem. It's merely the biggest one. If it costs so much, why would any country agree to host Formula One at all? Because hosting Formula One isn't supposed to make money from ticket sales alone. The real goal is much bigger. Governments hope visitors will fill hotels, eat at restaurants, shop in local malls, fly with AirAsia, visit Petronas Twin Towers. In other words, the race is an investment in the country's economy rather than a business to make money. And Malaysia learned this the hard way. Attendance had fallen from its peak years. Regional competition has intensified. Singapore had built its race into a luxury destination event. Meanwhile, Formula One continued increasing promoter fees under long-term contracts signed years earlier. In 2017, the checkered flag fell for the final time at Sepang. Many people believe that was the end of Malaysia's Formula One story. Drivers talked about how they enjoyed Sepang. YouTubers calling Sepang the best circuit in the world. Fans dreaming one day Formula One would return home. And for the first time in years, something changed. Formula One needed Malaysia more than Malaysia needed Formula One. Formula One, the most powerful player in motorsports. With more countries that want a Grand Prix than there are weekends available. Government compete against one another. Some offer bigger hosting fees. Some build entirely new circuits. Others spend billions creating glamorous street races just for the chance to appear on the calendar. When demand is that high, Formula One holds all the negotiating power. If one country says no, another country is usually waiting to say yes. But this time, it's different. Imagine you are running Taylor Swift's World Tour concert. You sold sponsorships, television rights, VIP packages. Flights have been booked. Hotels are full. The stage equipment is already on cargo planes traveling around the world. Then just a few weeks before the next concerts, the venue suddenly cancels. You don't just lose one night ticket sales. The entire tour is thrown into chaos. Crew members still need to be paid. Sponsors still expect exposure. Broadcasters still have empty airtime to fill. Replacing the venue quickly becomes more important than making the highest possible profit from that single show. Formula One faces exactly the same problem when a race unexpectedly drops off the calendar. People often think Formula One earns most of its money from ticket sales. It doesn't. Those ticket sales belong largely to the local race promoter. Formula One's biggest income comes from somewhere else entirely. Television rights, global sponsorships, commercial partnerships, licensing. These companies don't pay hundreds of millions because of one race. They pay because Formula One delivers a full championship, 24 races, months of continuous global exposure. Every missing race weakens that promise. Imagine paying for a 24-episode TV series only to discover you are getting 22 episodes instead. The value of the entire product changes. Suddenly, cancelling one race isn't just missing one weekend. It affects broadcasters, sponsors, advertisers, even the teams themselves. That's why Formula One has on several occasions look for replacement venues at extremely short notice. During the 2020 season, circuits that weren't originally on the calendar suddenly became Formula One hosts. Some returned after years away, others only had weeks to prepare, because keeping the championship running was worth more than sticking rigidly to the original schedule. In that year, Formula One suddenly became flexible. Even the fees suddenly became negotiable. Not because Formula One became generous, because an empty weekend is too expensive. At the time of this video, neither Formula One nor the Malaysian government has officially confirmed that Sepang will be a replacement venue. Formula One urgently needs a substitute race. Its negotiating position is very different from when it's selling places on the calendar years in advance. Think about booking a hotel. Reserve a room 6 months early during the peak season and you'll probably pay full price. Walk into the same hotel at 9 PM when several rooms are still empty. Suddenly, the receptionist has a reason to negotiate. The room hasn't changed, the timing has. That is the key. The economics of a planned Grand Prix and an emergency replacement Grand Prix are not the same business. And that's why Sepang has re-entered the conversation. Not because Malaysia suddenly decided Formula One is affordable again, but because the circumstances has changed. If the biggest expense is reduced, that is the promoter fee. The entire financial equation starts to look different. Remember what we learned earlier, the promoter fee wasn't just another expense, it was the expense. Remove that one number and suddenly we are no longer talking about 300 million ringgit. We are talking about something dramatically smaller. But here's the catch. Even if Formula One gave Malaysia a discount, that doesn't automatically make hosting the race a good deal. There are still millions of ringgits in costs waiting behind the scenes. So what exactly would Malaysia still have to pay? And more importantly, is Sepang already built to handle most of these costs better than almost any other circuit in Asia? That's where the real business advantage begins. At this point, you might be thinking, even if Formula One reduces the hosting fee, surely organizing a Grand Prix still costs a fortune. You are right. Formula One doesn't simply arrive with a few race cars and a checkered flag. It arrives like a travelling city. Thousands of people, dozens of cargo planes, hundreds of tons of equipment, entire television studio, team garages, medical facilities, hospitality suites, race control, security, emergency services. For one weekend, Formula One becomes the largest sporting event on the planet. So here's the question. If Malaysia were asked tomorrow to host a race just a few months from now, could Sepang actually do it? Surprisingly, it probably could. And that's because Malaysia already owns something many countries are still trying to build. Malaysia is not like Singapore. Every year, large parts of a city have to be transformed into a race circuit. Concrete barriers are installed, miles of fencing are erected, temporary grandstands appear almost overnight, roads are resurfaced, traffic is rerouted, businesses prepare for weeks of disruption, and once the race is over, much of it has to be dismantled again. The same is true for many street circuits around the world. They don't just host a race, they build one every single year. In Malaysia, the circuit already exists, not just the track, the entire ecosystem. Sepang International Circuit was purpose-built for Formula One, designed by the legendary circuit architect Herman Tilke. It opened in 1999 as one of the world's first modern Grade 1 facilities. Unlike temporary venues, Sepang already has a permanent pit garages, a race control tower, a medical center, paddock buildings, hospitality areas, media facilities, underground service infrastructure, high-capacity electrical systems, spectator grandstands. The bones of a Formula One weekend are already there. Malaysia isn't trying to squeeze racing into city streets. The circuit was built exactly for this purpose. But here's the part most people never think about. A Formula One circuit isn't useful if nobody can reach it. Thankfully, Sepang has another advantage that's easy to overlook. Look at the map. The circuit sits only minutes from Kuala Lumpur International Airport. That might sound like a small detail. It isn't. Formula One teams travel with hundreds of staff. Their cars, spare parts, and equipment are flown around the world in carefully planned logistics operations. Every extra hour spent transporting cargo increases costs. Even traffic jams create risks. At many circuits, equipment lands at the airport before beginning a long journey by road. At Sepang, the airport is next door. For a championship that moves thousands of tons of freight between continents, that proximity is a genuine competitive advantage. Then there's something even more valuable: experience. Hosting Formula One isn't just about having buildings. It's about having people who know what they are doing. For nearly 2 decades, Malaysia organised Formula One race almost every year. Many of the engineers, track operation staff, medical personnel, safety officials, volunteer marshals, and logistic companies involved in those events still exist today. On top of that, Sepang continues to host MotoGP, endurance races, and major international motorsports events. The circuit hasn't been growing grass. It has continued operating at an international standard. That means Malaysia wouldn't be learning from scratch. It would be dusting off a playbook that it has already written. Of course, that doesn't mean nothing needs to be done. Formula One has evolved since 2017. Cars are much larger, technology has changed. Safety requirements continue to improve. Certain facilities may require upgrades. The FIA will still inspect the circuit before approving any Grand Prix. Track surfaces need maintenance. Curbs must be checked, barrier systems inspected, communication systems tested, temporary structures installed, additional security hired, thousands of volunteers coordinated. Hosting a Formula One race is never as simple as unlocking the front gate. But here's the important distinction. Malaysia would mostly be upgrading, not rebuilding. That's a completely different level of investment. And this is where the economics begin to change. If someone gives you a fully equipped kitchen, your biggest expense isn't the rent anymore. They are the ingredients, they are the staff, the daily operating costs. The same logic applies here. Once the promoter fee is no longer the dominant expense, Malaysia's costs suddenly become operational rather than structural. Security, medical teams, cleaning, utilities, temporary staffing, marketing, transport, event management, still expensive, but nowhere near the cost of building a race from the ground up. So how much are we actually talking about? If the promoter fee disappeared tomorrow, would Malaysia still need 300 million ringgit? Or could the remaining bill be small enough for ticket sales and tourism alone to cover it? The answer might surprise you, because once we start adding up the numbers, this race begins to look less like a government subsidy and more like a business. So imagine Malaysia is hosting the race at Sepang. What happens now? Let's build Malaysia's Formula One budget from the ground up. First comes security. This isn't a concert with 80,000 fans. A Formula One Grand Prix attracts VIPs, corporate guests, government officials, international celebrities, hundreds of team personnel, thousands of workers, and potentially well over 100,000 spectators across the race weekend. Police officers, private security, traffic control, crowd management, emergency response team, all of them need to be coordinated. Then comes the marshals. If you ever watch Formula One, you've seen them waving yellow flags or rushing onto the track after an accident. Most aren't full-time employees. They are specially trained volunteers and officials who spend months preparing for race weekend. Without them, the race simply cannot happen. Next comes the medical operation. Formula One has the strictest medical requirements in motorsports. Doctors, paramedics, ambulances, recovery vehicles, medical helicopters, a fully equipped medical center. Every system has to be tested before the first practice session begins. Fortunately, Sepang already has many of these permanent facilities. That's one advantage of hosting Formula One for almost 20 years. But staffing and operating those facilities still costs money. Then there are the costs nobody noticed. Electricity, water, internet connectivity, timing system, cleaning crews, waste management, portable toilets, temporary fencing, signage, shuttle buses, volunteer uniforms, insurance, event management, customer service staff, marketing, ticketing systems. None of these expenses make headlines, but together they quietly add up. In MotoGP, the operational setup cost for weekend is 20 million ringgit. That is not including the rights fee. Could Sepang generate 20 million ringgit in a Formula 1 weekend? At first glance, it sounds ambitious, but let's break it down. Imagine race weekend sells 80,000 tickets, not 80,000 every day. 80,000 unique spectators over the event. If the average ticket works out to be 500 ringgit, that is already 40 million ringgit in gross ticket revenue. But does this mean Malaysia keep all of that 40 million ringgit? There are discounts, corporate packages, hospitality allocations, taxes, ticketing costs, revenue sharing arrangements. The exact split depends on how the event is structured, but here's the important point. Ticket revenue alone could easily exceed the estimated operating cost if attendance is strong, and tickets are only the beginning. Think about what every Formula 1 fan does after buying a ticket. They book a hotel, they eat at Mamak, they visit TRX. Some extend their holidays to visit Kuala Lumpur, others fly to Penang, Langkawi. Worst case scenario, they book an Asia flight to Singapore. One Formula 1 fan doesn't just buy a seat at a circuit, they spend money throughout the economy. That's why governments don't judge Formula 1 like a normal business. They judge it like a tourism campaign. And there is always a Visit Malaysia campaign every year. The question isn't, did Sepang make money? The bigger question is, did Malaysia make money? And those are two completely different answers. But there's another layer that almost nobody talks about. Even if Malaysia recovered every ringgit spent on operations, who actually receives that money? Does it go back to Sepang, the government, hotels, airlines, restaurants, private businesses? Because once you start following where every ringgit ends up, you discover that Formula 1 isn't one business. It's hundreds of businesses all earning from the same weekend. And that changes the way you should think about the race entirely. Most people immediately think of Sepang International Circuit makes all the money. After all, it's their event. They are selling the tickets. They are hosting the race. Surely, they are the biggest winner. No. In fact, they might not even be the biggest business benefiting from Formula 1. The race isn't the product, the race is the catalyst. Imagine a Formula 1 YouTuber flying in from Australia. They land at Kuala Lumpur International Airport on Thursday. Before they seen a Formula 1 car, they are already spending money. They clear immigration. They buy a SIM card. They exchange for ringgit. They drink Zeus coffee. Maybe they take the MRT. Someone earns from every single step. Then they check into a hotel. Perhaps they stay near KL Central. Perhaps in Putrajaya. Maybe even close to Sepang itself. That's 2 or 3 nights of hotel revenue that wouldn't exist without the race. The next morning, breakfast, coffee, lunch, dinner, convenience stores, shopping centers, local attractions. Every decision creates another transaction. And remember, this isn't just one YouTuber. It's tens of thousands of tourists. Now imagine that happening simultaneously. Restaurants suddenly needs extra staff. Hotels hire temporary workers. Grab drivers see higher demand. Retail stores stay open longer. Airlines fill more seats. Travel agencies sell packages. Even businesses with nothing to do with motorsports can benefit. That's what economists call the multiplier effect. One person's spending becomes someone else's income. That income is then spent again somewhere else. The same ringgit keeps moving through the economy. That is why governments justify hosting major sporting events. Not because the circuit itself becomes profitable, but because the wider economy becomes busier. However, here are where things become controversial. Do all economists agree with that? Not at all. Some studies have found that the economic impact of mega events is often overstated. Why? Because not every visitor is actually new money. Imagine your family from Johor who plan to spend the weekend shopping in Kuala Lumpur anyway. Instead, you buy Formula 1 tickets. From the country's perspective, you didn't bring extra money into Malaysia. You simply spend your money differently. Economists call this substitution. One activity replaces another. The race doesn't always create entirely new demand. Now compare that with international tourists, someone flying from Japan, Australia, China, or the Middle East. Without Formula 1, many of those visitors might never have travelled to Malaysia that weekend. Their hotel bill is the new money. Their restaurant spending is new money. Shopping, Pulau Redang holidays, those are all additional economic activity that may never have happened otherwise. This is why tourism agencies pay close attention to international arrivals rather than just ticket sales, because attracting one overseas visitor can be worth far more than selling one local ticket. And then there's someone who benefits even more than hotels. Airlines. A Formula 1 weekend doesn't just sell race ticket, it sells flights. Malaysia Airlines, Asia, Batik Air. Every full flight means more passengers buying baggage, meals, seat upgrades and airport services. The race begins generating revenue long before the engine starts. But perhaps the biggest winner of all isn't a hotel, isn't an airline, or even Sepang itself. It is Malaysia. For 3 days, hundreds of millions of viewers around the world see aerial shots of Kuala Lumpur, the Petronas Twin Towers, orangutan, tourism advertisements, Malaysian brands. Every television broadcast quietly becomes an advertisement for the country. And unlike a traditional commercial, people actually choose to watch. That kind of global exposure is incredibly difficult to buy through normal marketing campaigns. Which raises an even bigger question. If Formula 1 is partly a tourism campaign, then maybe we are asking the wrong question entirely. Instead of asking, does the race make money? The question becomes, how much exposure can Malaysia get from hosting a one-time only Formula 1 event? Let's go back to where this story began. Most Malaysians remember Formula 1 as a financial failure. The government was spending millions and millions of ringgit every year. Ticket sales weren't enough, attendance was falling. Eventually, Malaysia walked away. On the surface, that sounds like the end of the story. But now we know something that we didn't know at the beginning. Formula 1 itself was never the problem. The price was. Imagine a house that is selling for 1 million ringgit. Suddenly, you can buy for 450,000 ringgit. Confirm, everyone wants it. The house never changed. Only the price did. In 2026, the price of hosting a Formula 1 event is in Malaysia's favour. That doesn't mean Malaysia should immediately accept. A one-off replacement race is a very different business decision from signing a 5-year contract. A temporary race might make sense if the promoter fee is dramatically reduced and existing infrastructure keeps operating costs relatively low. Most Malaysians judge government projects by asking one simple question: did it make money? Business owners ask a different question. What was the return compared to the alternatives? Imagine Malaysia spent 20 million ringgit supporting a one-off Formula 1 race. Could that same 20 million ringgit buy the same amount of international exposure through television advertisement? Could it attract the same number of overseas tourists? Could it generate the same level of global media attention? That's the comparison that really matters, because money always has an opportunity cost. Every ringgit spent on Formula 1 is 1 ringgit that cannot be spent somewhere else. And that's why these decisions are never purely about motorsports. They are about tourism. International branding, foreign investment, business confidence, economic activity, even national pride. Formula 1 simply happens to be the platform where all those interests meet. That's why reasonable people can look at the exact same race and reach completely different conclusions. One person sees a government expense, another sees a tourism campaign. A hotel owner sees full rooms, an airline sees full flights. A restaurant owner sees long queues. A sponsor sees global television audiences. They are all looking at the same event. They are just measuring success differently. So, should Malaysia host a one-time Formula 1 race at Sepang? The honest answer is yes. Not because Formula 1 has suddenly become cheap. Not because Malaysians suddenly forgot why it left. And certainly not because we should sign another long-term contract. We should do it because this isn't the same business deal. For nearly 2 decades, Malaysian paid full price. This time, Formula 1 may be the one asking for help. And when the terms of the deal change, the decisions should change too. Think about everything lining up at this very moment. Interest in Formula 1 has never been higher. A whole new generation has discovered the sport through YouTube. Malaysia has just successfully captured the nation's attention by broadcasting the FIFA World Cup on RTM. Millions of Malaysians are once again tuning in to global sporting events together. The excitement is already here. Now imagine adding Formula 1 to that momentum. For one weekend, hotels are full, flights are full, restaurants are busy, thousands of international fans discover Malaysia, and hundreds of millions of viewers around the world are reminded of something many have forgotten. 2026 is the year to show the world again the greatest comeback story isn't Formula 1 returning to Malaysia. It's the world remembering why Sepang is still one of the greatest racing circuits ever built.